And so, it just, I think, adds the exclamation point to how important story is
Mm-hmm.
in our everyday life.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. And we'll give a few recommendations to you, our listeners. Beware, possible spoilers ahead. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. And as all good stories do, the world got even crazier. But, as Neil Gaiman says, fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. Since I believe that stories have the power to show us the way and give us courage to keep going, I wanted to see if that was true for my guests as well. You're listening to episode 25. Today I'm talking to Maria Church. Maria and I think we met through my sister. Is that correct? Or was it Michael Serapina?
I think it was both. I think it was at a barbecue at Michael's house.
Right.
And you and your sister were there, as well as your spouses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all met then and just hit it off. I mean, we were very like-minded in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, once we got to talking and we realized that we were all at that time writing. And so Michael had told me about the fact that you guys were writing together. You were doing a writing group. Yeah, it was a writing group. Yeah. And I can't remember if you guys invited me or if I invited myself. Because I
don't remember either.
Started that so badly.
I don't remember either, but I think that was wonderful because it ended up just being the three of us. And I love Michael's book. I would love to have him on the podcast and talk about it because when I read it, I just laughed out loud sometimes at some of the antics when he was a kid. It was
so enjoyable. And Michael is just masterful at storytelling.
Oh, he is. Yes. So when we were in that writers group together, I think that's when you were starting your business. And I read your first book, Love-Based Leadership, which I see is on the shelf behind you. Yes. And now I'm on chapter 5 of A Course in Leadership, 21 Spiritual Lessons on Power, Love, and Influence. And I'm sorry, I haven't finished reading it yet, but when is it coming out?
June 8th.
June 8th. Oh, I better hurry up and get busy and finish reading it so I can write a review. Yes. And I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And thinking, oh, yeah, through all my years of working, it would have been nice to have some leaders who were like the leaders that you're trying to foster with all of your clients.
Sure. I was going to say a lot of the stories and ideology of that book really came from my experiences of very positive experiences of working with leaders that really taught me some, again, really positive aspects of leadership. Mm-hmm. And, leaders that taught me some very negative things about leadership. Mm-hmm. And then also the gaps in between, as a leader myself, there was a certain desire that I had. Of course, every leader has a leader, right? Every leader has a boss. Mm-hmm. And so there were certain aspects of, my boss, for instance, that I wish I had learned or seen over the years. And then gaps that I felt in myself too. How can I improve as a leader? Because I'm a firm believer that leaders really need to continue learning and development and growth. Mm-hmm. And so in my quest to do that, I definitely found some gaps. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about that book. So A Course in Leadership, 21 Spiritual Lessons on Power, Love, and Influence. That really, again, came after Love-Based Leadership. And so the Love-Based Leadership book, when it first came out 10 years ago, was a concept that really wasn't done, and that was certainly looking at love as a powerful leadership competency and a powerful leadership force, and also the discussion of fear, because I am a firm believer in love is the antithesis of fear. And so, I had a lot of experiences of both love and fear in my career. And so, that when I did that 10 years ago, there were no other books on a shelf. There was no shelf really for my book. Was it a business book? Was it a leadership book? Was it a personal development book for spirituality? And maybe I wasn't the first, but I certainly was one of very few 10 years ago that talked about that combination of leading with love and spirituality, or even just leadership and spirituality. Today, 10 years later, when I wrote the 10th anniversary edition, I now have I see lots of other books on that shelf, and there are multiple shelves now. And so I find that really exciting and very encouraging. And I found that by decompartmentalizing love, leadership, and spirituality and bringing them together, I found that people were so open to that, and that it really resonated with people, and that there was actually even a hunger for more. And so that really was the impetus in the book that's coming out on June 8th, A Course in Leadership, 21 Spiritual Lessons on Power, Love, and Influence. And so in this book, of course, I talk about leadership. As always, it is juxtaposed with spirituality. And in this book, I went even further in spirituality because I really believe that what we're seeking today is a real, authentic leadership. And we know that authenticity comes from our heart center. I mean, our heart and love is our most authentic self. Right. And so as we hunger for authenticity in our leaders and in our lives, frankly, then I really felt compelled to write a manual on how do we do that, because we're still, compartmentalizing it. Right. And so how do we then decompartmentalize that and integrate it actually? And so the course, again, has the 21 lessons. And so I formatted the book so that there was a lesson, a teaching. And of course, I've been teaching for, over 20 years. So, I have that ideology in mind then. So I start with a lesson, of course, illustrated with examples and stories and all of that. And then I give the real practical practice. Here are the actual things that you could start doing, the actions, the behaviors, activities that you could actually start doing to start this integration. And then I end with a prayer or meditation, and I invite people, if this resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, sit in silence or something to let this really solidify and to let it really sink in. And I felt really a divine guidance as I wrote this book, to be completely honest with you. I felt completely guided in every step of the way. I mean, to the point where as I was writing and I would go to the bookshelf to look at something for a reference or inspiration, and a book would fall off the shelf as I was pulling one out, I was just so open and in the zone that I would just pick up the book that fell and see what the message was that I was supposed to receive. And so this book is very special to me, and I'm proud of it. But I'll be honest with you, Lucinda, I was just the vehicle in it. Like I said, I really felt that the message and the words were coming right through me.
I know that feeling. I love that feeling.
I know. It's like in the zone, or
yes.
That connection is strong, whatever we want to call it, right?
Yeah. Because I've had it in various things, either writing or sometimes when I was on stage. I haven't been on stage for a long time, or directing or teaching. Somebody would, a student would ask me something and an answer would just come out of my mouth. And it was like, where'd that come from?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is really being present.
Right.
Because if we spend our time in our interactions with one another thinking about what we're going to say, then we're really not present.
Right.
We're really not listening and absorbing and bringing it in. Yes. And when we do that, I find the same thing with coaching. When I started coaching, I would have my list of brilliant questions in front of me. And so as, my client was speaking, I'm looking for the next brilliant question. And it luckily very early on in that coaching portion of my career, I would abandon the questions because I just knew that if I was present and really connecting with that person, then I would know what question to ask. It would come to me.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about your coaching business? What's it called and what do you do?
Sure. So it's funny because I just did a workshop this morning and I was meeting a lot of people for the first time. And, they would say, well, so, what is your business? What else do you do? Because obviously I was facilitating a workshop. And I really struggled with, well, I'm a coach, I'm a consultant, well, I'm a professional speaker. Well, yeah, and I'm a trainer. And I really struggled with that. I think the best description is I help find solutions, and then, that's the main focus. I help find solutions for my clients that are looking for solutions. And then whatever modality is necessary to accomplish that goal, whether it's training, whether it's coaching, whether it's consulting, whether it's speaking, whatever that is, then that comes into the mix. It's almost like when we're preparing a meal and we've got all the spices on the spice rack. Well, we don't just use only one spice, or we don't use all of the spices in every dish. It depends on what your anticipated outcome is. And that's how we determine which spices we're going to put into the dish. So my business is the same way. So we do a variety of actions like executive coaching, which I love, working with executive leaders. We've also started doing what I'm referring to as leadership coaching, where we're working with people who maybe aren't the executives of the organization, but maybe they're, depending on how high the hierarchy is, maybe they're middle level managers, or maybe they're in between mid-level managers and the executive team, And so that's a real focus on leadership competencies and troubleshooting leadership challenges and identifying opportunities, and then wrapping action plans around how to seize that opportunity. And then, of course, the consulting. One of the things that we do a lot with the government leadership solutions side of the house is we're working with local governments, cities and counties, to help them really strategically and intentionally shape their organizational cultures to represent who they are as an organization and who they want to be. And I love that work because, let's face it, we spend the vast majority of our days working in the office, or of course, virtually through COVID. But that's where we spend the majority of our days as adults. And if it's not a healthy work environment, if it's not a productive work environment, if it's not a safe work environment, then that's how we end up getting illnesses. And, that's what keeps Tums and sleeping pills in business is all of that worry and that stress that comes with, oh, I have to go back into the office again. So I love, love, love that work. And then another thing we do with our clients is leadership development. And so over the years, we, have a leadership development program that we deliver to our clients. Mm-hmm. And during COVID, our business came to a screeching halt, especially on the government side, which we do work with private industry as well on the corporate side. But the vast majority over the last couple of years has really been in the local government space. Mm-hmm. And that came to a screeching halt because our local governments had a lot of work to do when COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And they were in crisis mode, mm-hmm. Virtual working and remote working when they were not set up for that, because mm-hmm. local governments really were, I think, one of the industries that really resisted remote working, where we saw a lot of that happening on the private side, but not on the local government side. So one of the blessings that came out of that experience for them was realizing they could work remotely and they could be very productive in doing that. So, they were worried about that. They were worried about the safety of their employees. And then, of course, they had all of the community responsibilities.
Oh, yeah.
So they were literally in crisis mode. I mean, they were looking at the end of the day, let alone the end of the week, or developing our leaders for next year, So yeah. That came to a screeching halt. And what my team and I did after we realized it wasn't 2 weeks at home, we gathered and we brainstormed and we planned and we looked at what are we really good at and how do we give great value to our clients and how can we then pivot with this new environment, and what have we been doing that we don't really enjoy doing that we want to let go of anyway.
Right.
So, yeah. We really explored all of those different areas. And we knew that we were very, very good at developing leaders. And we knew we had just top shelf curriculum that we've developed over the years. And so I actually pulled out of my file cabinet, all of the curriculum that we've developed over the last 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. And I started sorting it on my desk. And so my initial intention was to take our 12-month leadership development program and put it into a 12-week accelerated learning program online. Well, I realized that we had a lot more curriculum than that. And so what started as a 12-week online program actually ended up being Leadership Development University. Oh, wow. And so now this platform, which is online, is offering 3 programs. So hence the sorting of the curriculum. And so we have a supervisors and emerging leaders track. Mm-hmm. We've rolled that out. We've already had a cohort go through it. Amazing, fantastic feedback. We were so tickled. And then we're in the development right now. It should be live this summer for managers and mid-level managers. And then the 3rd track will be for executive teams, and that'll be out at the end of the year. And oh my gosh, I am so proud of my team. This is probably some of the best work that we've done collectively to date. And so, COVID again gave us a pause. I'd been pondering this for a couple of years, but have been so busy in the business that I never took the time to develop it. And the pause that COVID gave us was again another blessing that came out of that horrific year.
Yes. And that's when I started my podcast, was during COVID.
Right. And I read about that, you were really tapping into the power of story. And I was silently applauding you as I was reading that, Lucinda, because I thought, what a beautiful way, to give to the community. So kudos to you. It's very cool.
Oh yeah. Well, for years, I kept thinking, what is my ultimate passion? And what I finally came to one day when I was meditating or something, or it might have been cooking or driving, was I love story. That's the thing that I love the very most is story. And Celeste,
yes.
And she and I could go forever talking about movies and books, and Ariel, her daughter, now also is kind of in on that whole thing. So, and it was fun. It was fun learning how to do the podcast. It was fun learning how to use GarageBand to do the edits. I love every aspect of it. And I can't say that I have ever had that experience with anything else, not even theater. I mean, I loved doing theater. I loved directing it, but there were always certain aspects of it, like the tech week. If you've ever done theater tech week.
Yes. I was a former actress. Yes.
Oh, yes. So you know what it's like. And it was like, I just dreaded tech week, whether I was on the acting side or the directing side or the stage manager side. When I was a stage manager, that was the worst.
That's, I think, the hardest job in theater. I really do.
Yeah. Yes, it is so hard. And there were a couple of times, one time in particular, when I was the stage manager of a play, and it happened to be that it was on a riverboat, and the play happened in different parts of the riverboat, and the audience could go around and just stop and watch a scene and then go on and stop and watch another scene. Well, 2 or 3 days before the opening, one of the actresses' father died. And so the director said, you've got to take her part until she comes back. And it was like, wait a minute. So I'm carrying this huge book that had all the scenes. And, I knew some of her lines, but I didn't know them all. So, I had 2 or 3 intensive days, probably 2 days of intensive blocking rehearsals. And
sure.
And it just happened that, of course, it was opening night and the press was there. And I was like, oh, man. So that was really difficult. I was so glad when she came back and I could just
I'm sure you were fabulous. I'm sure you were.
But, wow. There were things like that were like so stressful. Mm-hmm. And this is not stressful. There's not anything that's stressful about doing it. I love doing it. Some of the conversations have been so long that I have, 3 or 4 or 5 days where I have to edit it down.
Sure.
But that's fun too. So.
I feel like that about the public speaking that I do. Which I guess is the other side of the business, right? The public speaking and, of course, the writing. I love delivering keynote presentations. I mean, I just love the professional speaking. I just don't see myself tiring of it. I mean, maybe someday I will, but it energizes me so much with each talk that I give that I can't wait for the next one. Well, so I totally understand that.
Yeah, that is one thing that's really great about teaching is that interaction between the students and me. And Dave is kind of my team teacher with acting. He's got all these techniques to help these new actors who have never, students that have never tried it before. And it just puts them at their ease, and then they can they can play with the character. They can play with the motivations and intentions and, because he has all these great techniques. So it's wonderful working with him.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I do enjoy teaching as well. I love the interaction and it keeps me sharp. And it also, it keeps me aware of other people's perspectives, especially if I have younger students who are early in their careers, because you forget what a perspective could be like at the beginning of your career.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that. It's funny because I say every time I teach, I learn probably more, and I giggle that, you get paid for it.
I know. I know, really. Yeah. Well, I was wondering, I know that you probably read a lot of nonfiction books on leadership, but I was wondering, I'm sure that you have books that you read just for fun and enjoyment. And I was wondering, what are your favorite genres?
So honestly, my favorite genre is personal development and spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my favorite. I don't like to use the term self-help because that implies that there's something broken.
Right.
I think we're perfect in where we are. Mm-hmm. We're perfect in our imperfection. And if we have a desire to continue to grow and develop, great. But I think the idea that we're broken, I think, is dangerous, and not one that I ascribe to. So it's really personal development and spirituality.
And do you have any favorite authors?
Oh, yes. Dr. Wayne Dyer actually changed my life. When I first read The Power of Intention, that I think by far is my favorite book of his, although there are different experiences that I've had that have really put an imprint on my life that, were different books of his that are very special to me for different reasons. But The Power of Intention was just really mind-blowing for me because it opened up thoughts and ideas that I hadn't entertained before. And I just adored him and his writing. And really kind of a special thing happened, Lucinda, with the first edition of Love-Based Leadership, 10 plus years ago, when that came out, and it was published through Balboa Press, which was a brand new acquired self-publishing company that came under the umbrella of Hay House. And I so desperately wanted to be a Hay House author, with my first book, right out of the gate, wanted to be a Hay House author. And again, knowing that my book was bridging the gap bridging, the two ideas of leadership and spirituality. And then I, being brand new to the industry, I didn't know about, book agents and all of that kind of stuff. And I was so disappointed when I saw that Hay House would only accept manuscripts from agents. And I was just so disappointed because I didn't have an agent. And at that point, I didn't have any clue, any idea about how to get an agent, right? Brand new doing that. And then I read about Balboa Press and I thought, oh, they're part of Hay House. So I might have to come in the back door. I'd still be in the house, right?
Right, yeah.
So I did the self-publishing with Hay House, and it was actually more of a hybrid, probably what they would call a hybrid today. So my book was coming out in like November of 2010, the first edition. And I had just left the corporate world in October, and I was launching my business at the same time that my book was being launched in November. And I went to my first Hay House conference in, I think it was Fort Lauderdale. Oh, I can't remember now. Tampa. That's where it was. It was in Tampa, Florida. And I mean, it was just, talk about mind-blowing. It was a mind-blowing experience. And I went with my very, very good friend, Dorothy. And we were at the opening night, and Dr. Dyer did the closing talk that opening night. And I was almost like a groupie, right? With the rock star. I was just so enamored and taken with him. And I remember before I went, I set the intention that I was going to meet him and I was going to meet Louise Hay. So those were my intentions before I left. after his talk, well, I'm going to back up for just a moment. Just before his talk at the break, they had a bookstore. And I went into the bookstore and I saw my book for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And I held it in my hands. And you remember that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorothy said that I levitated off the ground watching me. I was just literally elated. Okay, so then Dr. Dyer talked, the conference ended. And of course, we were on such a huge high at that point, and we were at the hotel right across from the conference center, literally across the street. And so we were walking across the street, and Dorothy realized she hadn't called her husband, and she promised him that she would call him.
Oh.
And so we stopped. There was a little bench to sit, and we stopped, and she called her husband. And when she was on the phone with her husband, guess who walked by with his family? It was Dr. Dyer.
So
I was dying. I was just dying, all these little mini deaths. And so I'm tugging on her arm, like miming to her, Dorothy, there he is. There's Dr. Dyer. He's over there. So Dorothy, cut her conversation short with Frank. We jump up. We're walking behind him and his family. And I'm, in my mind, I'm like, oh, God, there he is. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I kid you not. We cross the street. He stops. He turns around and looks at me. And I walked right up to him and I said, oh my gosh, I have to tell you, I just held my first book in my hand. And he threw his arms around me and he hugged me. Congratulations. And I said, you have no idea how important you were in me writing that book. And I just want to thank you. And of course, I didn't even think about the camera, but I didn't need it because that memory is burned in my head forever. It was one of the most special moments, in my life so far. It was just, I don't think I slept that night. I probably levitated above the bed. I don't know. But it was very, very special, very special. So I'm so thrilled that I had that brief exchange with him before he passed.
Well, I kind of understand that because I've read a lot of Pam Grout's books, and I just on a whim, something came to me one day, not too long ago, email her and ask her if she'll be on your podcast. So I did. And the reply came a couple of days later and she said, I thought you'd never ask.
Oh, what a beautiful response. I love that.
I know.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so, of course, immediately I called Celeste. Celeste, Pam Grout said she'd be on my podcast. So that was only just a few weeks ago that she was, the guest on my podcast. And it was just a wonderful conversation. And so, I have other people that I have as hopefully will be guests on my podcast. And I
set the intention, my friend. Set the intention.
I just wrote them down and said, these are people that I would like to be on my podcast. And so like Brene Brown is one of them, and Elizabeth Gilbert is another one. And
nice.
Yeah. And I have often thought about Greg Braden, asking him to be on my podcast.
He spoke at that same conference. What an extraordinary speaker.
Oh, and we want to move to New Mexico eventually when Barry's retired. And he lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So
well, there you go.
We want to live in Los Alamos, which is not very far from Santa Fe. But so one of these days when I get the urge, I may email him because I get his newsletter, just like I do Pam Grout. I get her newsletter. And
so I have a share with you. When you said Brene Brown, it reminded me of this. I had heard from a reporter from Forbes magazine a couple weeks ago. She had sent me an email and said that Love-Based Leadership was one of the top 10 books for Forbes magazine on leading with love.
Oh, cool.
And in that article, I was right next to Brene Brown. That was like so thrilling. I mean, it was thrilling enough to be listed in Forbes, right? In Forbes magazine. But to be right next to Brene Brown. And then I realized that it was in alphabetical order, but I didn't care. Yeah. There I was, right next to that beautiful woman.
That's right. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, and I don't have a lot of followers on my podcast yet, but I'm getting more on my website all the time, more followers on my website all the time. And some of them are just following my blog, and some of them are following both the podcast and the...
Which is wonderful.
Yes, it's wonderful to have all those followers. Yes.
Well, and your blog is wonderful. Your blog is wonderful. I really enjoy it.
Oh, you still read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, wow. Well, tomorrow I'll probably write a little thing. I'm taking a little break because I have so many podcast episodes that I need to edit that I have to take a little break from my blog for a while so I can get everything edited before we go on our vacation. But I just dream about, it's okay. Eventually, lots of people will find it, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. That's fine, because I've been writing my blog since 2013, and I'm just now approaching 350 followers. I don't have a lot of followers, but that's okay. I'm good with that.
One of the beautiful things about the written word, though, it's there. Whether it's a blog, whether it's a book. That's part of our legacy, which of course increases the responsibility.
Yeah, that's true. Since I don't have any children, I guess that's my legacy.
Every once in a while, somebody will circle back 5, 10, I've had people 20 years later, share a brief story or exchange, or maybe they were a former student and they just finished their doctoral degree or something. But man, those are just gems, aren't they?
They are. And I was telling someone else on one of the podcast episodes that I have students who are now filmmakers and who are involved. I had a couple. Dave and I have a couple of students who were in the acting class last semester who auditioned for a play, and they're going to be in this play with the Sierra Vista Community Theater. And, or they want to go into musical theater that's so fantastic. They're following their dreams, just like I'm following my dreams.
Right.
And one of the guests that I'm going to be talking to in a couple of weeks is one of my former high school students from Douglas. And she just got accepted at the workshop thing. I don't even know what it is. I can't wait for her to tell. But she's an English teacher, and she's also a writer. So how she does that, I don't know, because I was busy every single moment when I was teaching English.
Hello, exactly.
Yeah.
When you're teaching, period, you're busy every single moment.
Right. Well, she doesn't have to drive an hour there and back like I did when I was teaching in Douglas. But so I'm excited to hear about this prestigious writing program. It's going to be so cool to hear about that. So I always love it when I have students that are doing what they love. And since I don't have any children, I guess that's my kind of...
Your babies.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I always love the way Oprah talks about her girls, from the school. Mm-hmm. So she has lots and lots of kiddos.
Yeah, her daughters. She calls them her daughters. In a way, I will miss that, but I'll be talking to all kinds of interesting people on the podcast too. So,
like Brene Brown and
right.
Who was the other one you said?
Elizabeth Gilbert. Yes. But there are lots of other ones that I've written down that I would like to talk to. And sometimes it just comes out of my mouth. Like I was at the little independent bookstore in Sierra Vista ordering some books for Christmas. And I just asked Roxana if she wanted to be on my podcast. And that was a really fun episode. I enjoyed that so much. And then the other day I got a check from the Bisbee Books and Music bookstore. And because they had sold a couple of my books. And I said, I should talk to those guys. So I'm going to have to go over there and see if they'll be on my podcast. I mean, I just get these flashes,
sure.
You were one of them.
Yeah, if you work in a bookstore, probably you're a bibliophile like us, right?
Yes.
You just can't get enough of the books.
Yes.
I was going to say, I remember when, the state was on fire and certainly our area was on fire. Was it about probably 10 years ago or 8 or 9 years ago? Mm-hmm. And, we had a little bit of warning, like a day and a half warning to pack up and vacate. And of course, I took all the family photos. Mm-hmm. I took our files, for taxes and stuff. Mm-hmm. Of course, the computers. Right. And I think that was pretty much it, of course, with clothes and toiletries. But I remember once we were evacuated, and we were evacuated for a long time, well over a week. I remember, oh my gosh, if there's ever a time again where that happens, which I hope there isn't, I will definitely bring my pillow. But what I was so worried about were my books, because, it's taken decades to establish the library that I have. These books are like my best friends. Mm-hmm. And the thought of losing them in the fire that's really what bothered me. I mean, I thought, oh, well, if the house goes, we're insured and I like to decorate. So I'll just, do a new house and decorate the new house. But once the realization that the books and the Christmas ornaments, that we've accumulated and acquired over the years, those were like, oh, but I don't think we'd be able to take all that with us, especially with a fast evac.
Right.
For one thing, we'd have to have a U-Haul, but for another, it would just be too long. We wouldn't have that kind of time.
Yes. During that fire, Barry was working in the public information office. And so he was working with, he was taking phone calls and working with the national people who had come to help fight the fire. And so he's in town and I'm home and we get the evacuation notice and he cannot come home. So I had to pack up everything. Fortunately, at that time.
So you're throwing stuff in the car by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we only had 2 computers then. Now we have iPad, 3 computers, So, but I just went around and took pictures of all the books. And then we have bookshelves in almost every room of our house. So I just went around and
we have books everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've been in your house. I know. So I was taking pictures of all the bookshelves. Because
that's a good idea. That's a very good idea.
Same thing. Fortunately, all of our financial records are on the computer. So I didn't need to take files or anything like that. But oh yeah. And then my mom had that small house near St. Andrew's Church, and Celeste and Jamie and their kids and Barry and I were all at her house.
And then you probably had to get evacuated at some point.
No, she didn't ever have to get evacuated, fortunately. But Celeste and Jamie.
Because that happened to us. We evacuated to my sister's house. And then we had to all get evacuated from there on Father's. The fire and the winds were like 60-mile-an-hour winds. And and they couldn't put the helicopters in the air because the winds were so bad.
Yes.
Oh, and we could see that wall of orange literally in our rearview mirror as we were all driving away.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we were evacuated twice.
Yeah, we were at Celeste and Jamie's because they're where they were living at the time, the back of their house butted up against the fort property. Mm-hmm. And so we were helping them pack up. They had received the preliminary, whatever it's called, prepare to evacuate. Right. And I looked up out the back and said, oh, because it was just
Yeah. A wall of orange.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible to see.
And the kids we had to go pick up the children because, one was in school and the other was at the daycare center. So we split up, and Jamie and Celeste called the daycare center, and we got Shane and they got Ariel and went to mom's. But fortunately, we were already all packing up and we just had to throw stuff into the cars. And
St. Andrews is the one in town. I was thinking of Our Lady of the Mountains. That's what I was thinking of, because I know that whole neighborhood had to evacuate too.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a tough time, that's for sure.
It was,
but
scary.
Luckily we didn't lose the books.
No, and you didn't lose your house. And
we didn't lose the house.
And the day that it started, I was out for some reason. I went out on the front porch and I could see it just west of us. And I said,
before it got big?
Mm-hmm. I said, there's a fire over there. And it was near the Coronado National Memorial.
Right. I think that's where it started.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so fortunately for us, it went up the mountains and didn't ever come east. So
it never hit the valley.
Mm-mm. Well, it did farther north of us.
You're right. Over by my way. Yeah. It certainly jumped the highway.
Yeah, but not where we were.
Good for you.
Yeah.
But you don't know that, right? When you're evacuated, you don't know. It was it was frustrating.
Yeah.
I actually, with Dorothy, we actually started writing a book after the fire to really highlight people in the community. But we abandoned the project just because the book concept was not only stories, because the stories that came out of that experience were really incredible, but we also had photography. And our concept was to do like a table book, right? Where, you have the big, beautiful pictures and then the copy with it. But it was just, we tried to get that picked up and we couldn't. That said, who knows? Maybe on one of the anniversaries, we might try and reprise that because we still have all the files from it.
Yes.
Good times, Lucinda, good times.
Yes. Yes. Well, one of the really interesting things that happened, Barry would come home every night and tell us all the news because he was in the public information office. And he said that they were talking to the director of the national team. And he said to them, this small community is so well prepared for something like this. He said, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. And what we were hearing, which is why we wanted to write the book, and I think we were calling it The Monument Fire, a Community Love Affair, was what we were going to call it, because so many of the firefighters and the volunteers that came into the community to assist commented time and time again, we have never seen a community pull together like you all did during the fire. And that's so true. I mean, people pulled together.
Yes.
It was incredible. And so that's why we really wanted to honor it. It wasn't so much the fire. It was literally the love that was happening in the community.
Yeah. It was so scary. And it was also amazing.
Like anything that can be devastating. It's the yin and the yang, right? It's that balance. Anything that can be devastating, there can be such a beauty and joy showing from it.
Yeah.
Like the devastation of COVID, and then hearing the stories of love and seeing how families were reconnecting and how people at work were seeing each other as human beings because, the cat was jumping on the desk during the meeting, or the child was coming in saying they were hungry. We were seeing each other as human beings, and bosses were accessible. They were right in front of the computer screen interacting with people. And so there were lots of blessings in life is like that. You think of some of the tragic shootings that happen and then how people just rise up with love and compassion and care. And nobody was asking, what your sexual preference is or what your ethnicity is or what your political views are. None of that mattered. It was humanity. It was humanity. It was human beings connecting with one another.
Yes, right. So are you having a launch party for your book?
I will have a celebration. We'll absolutely have a celebration. I'm going to do a couple of little mini events, some Facebook Lives before that happens. One of the really cool things that our publisher does, which is Dudley Court Press, they, on the release of every author's book that they do, they ask the author to pick a charitable organization. And what they do is they donate a portion of all of the opening day, the release day sales to that organization. And I just thought that was so cool that I committed to match it. So we did that for Love-Based Leadership, and we chose the Tohono Chul Park in Tucson, which is a beautiful combination of course, botanical, right? All of the wonderful desert cacti and flowers and other plants that grow. And then artwork, they do they have a beautiful art exhibit there. And the book was released on December 8th, which would have been my father's birthday. And I had just lost my father at the beginning of the year before COVID hit. And so choosing Tohono Chul was really in honor of my dad. And so that was really special to be able to support Tohono Chul that way. So for this next book, A Course in Leadership, I selected Boulder Crest Foundation, which is based out of Colorado, but they have a satellite branch in Sonoyta, Arizona. And a friend of mine is executive director over there. And I've learned from him about all of the work that they do at Boulder Crest. And they are 100% committed to working with veterans and also first responders who really need support after the traumas that they've experienced in the battlefield or out in the field. And the work that they do, Lucinda, is just beautiful. It's really beautiful. And it's holistic. It's mind, body, and spirit. So I thought not only is this organization just amazing, but it was very aligned with the messages in the book.
Oh, yes.
So I'll be doing at least one Facebook Live with Joe, who's the executive director over there, to talk about both. And again, of course, it's to promote the book too, but more importantly, it's to promote the book launch because it's the sales at the release that support him from both the publisher and myself. So we'll be doing a couple of events gearing up to that. And then, of course, we'll have a celebration and probably a Facebook Live that day as well to celebrate.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, now that I have my COVID hair gone and I have my hair cut, I'm going to start doing my little Instagram videos again. But I just,
oh, good.
Yeah, I couldn't stand the way my hair was. So I just stopped doing them. And now
I know you can tell the people that feel comfortable now going back in public because there's shorter hair again. Yeah, for that year, we all had long hair and roots.
Oh, yes, really. Well, I've decided to let my hair go gray.
I know a lot of people that did last year.
Well, this has been so fun. Do you have anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
Well, I know that you love to tell stories on this. And I have, I guess, one last story that I'll share with you. And it's the work that I've been doing with the local govs. So I had mentioned earlier that I love doing the culture work, the organizational culture work. And, I have a model and a process that I take the clients through, and they do the work to determine, what the answers are going to be, right?
Right.
And so part of the framework is really articulating and defining the core culture of the organization. And within that core culture are three aspects. Our why, and it's not the mission statement. Mission statement is the head. The why connects the head with the heart. That's the power, right? the why, because that gets us out of bed on Monday mornings and into the office when we can connect with that why. And then the point of view or how you do your why, and then non-negotiable values. Well, I was working with this executive team in a county, and we were working on the why statement for the organization. Mm-hmm. And so in preparation for that, the homework that I gave the executive team was to go back and talk about the why with their departments. And then they were to bring their voices, their department's whys, so that we could hear that and understand that, and then look at the collective. Well, you know me, listen, I'm a very positive person, and I up as not only half full, but overflowing.
Right.
And so when we got back together to share our whys, the county coroner was raising her hand, so eager to go, so eager to share. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, she works with dead people. So I'm not really sure what that why could be. So she said that it was very easy for her team to articulate their why. Mm-hmm. That was that they give people closure. And that stopped me dead in my tracks. I thought that was so special. And so, it just, I think, adds the exclamation point to how important story is in our everyday life, whether we're at work, whether we're with our loved ones, whether we're writing a book. Story is powerful.
Yes. Well, one of the upcoming episodes, I was talking with a couple of women, Beth Henson and Ceci Lewis, about their Douglas project, where they're talking to just ordinary people and videotaping their life stories. And I was thinking, every life is a library of stories.
Yes. Yes. Powerful, poignant, silly, funny, happy, sad, tragic. Right. You're right. That's a library.
Yeah.
What a beautiful analogy. What a beautiful analogy.
Yeah. So it makes me cry to think of all the stories that we missed because we didn't get to hear those people's stories. They didn't write them down, or we didn't pay attention to them. So
that's where legacy comes in. Huh?
Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm glad that those women are taking down people's stories.
Yeah, what a special project.
Yes. And it's not the only one in the country, but because I noticed that there were others, and I was thinking, oh yeah, we need those.
Yep, absolutely.
We need those. Thank you so much for being my guest. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me.
Oh, it has been my pleasure. And it was just so much fun. I felt like we were just chatting over coffee.
I know, really. That's true. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles, at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.